Isekais, perhaps one of the most oversaturated genres in anime alongside getting kicked out of the JRPG Heroes Party these days. For those not in the know, Isekai is a genre in anime about someone from one world being transported to another, usually one that is set in a fantasy or video game fantasy-based setting, and saving the day with some godly cheat powers on easy mode. Admittedly, that is the modern description of the genre, but the most relevant to today's video. Like others, I've become rather burnt out by this genre due to how many get pumped out every year, with at least 70% of them all being the same carbon copy slop. While I don't despise isekais, the story and characters need to be really good for me to give it a chance, or a cute enough gimmick to draw me in. So, who wants to see a Power Ranger beat up some D&D dorks? Hey there, Phantom Skull the comic book VTuber here, and today we're looking at the first 3 episodes of Red Ranger Isekai to see what this goofy genre mashup has to offer. Yes, I'm aware that its real title is Red Ranger Becomes an Adventure in Another World, but you say that over and over again in a video essay and tell me how your lungs feel after. In case it wasn't obvious, I'm a huge fan of Super Sentai and Kamen Rider styled shows, with it being a partial inspiration for my superhero costume. Finding out our Red Ranger was the protagonist of this latest isekai anime, and not black-haired blank slate number 445 with generic cheat power and harem of waifus who all share a lack of personality beyond wanting this guy's dick, was refreshing. My biggest gripe has always been how the isekai genre rarely does anything interesting with the protagonists. I want wild genre crossover madness, which is what Red Ranger Isekai delivers. You can tell right from the first 5 minutes of episode 1 that a lot of love and detail went into the Sentai half of this show. Almost everything down to the tone and even the music wouldn't be out of place of an actual Super Sentai season. But beyond the fun of a hot-blooded Red Ranger stomping around a standard JRPG fantasy realm, is the story and characters worth sticking around for all season? Let's find out. So the story begins in a pretty standard Super Sentai season finale. The evil organization, the Relationship Enders, launching their final attack on Earth to try and destroy humanity's bonds. Our heroes, the Kizuna Rangers, lock and load to take the fight to them. Unfortunately, all but Kizuna Red get injured on the way to the Enders base, so Red must go alone to face the villainous Breakup King. Oh my god, this is so silly, I love it. Red sacrifices himself to finish off the Breakup King, sad but happy to protect his friends and embrace his fate. But Red didn't get the note about the other half of the show's title, and wakes up in a fantasy world. 6 months later, we cut to our co-protagonist, Yidra Arvone, a brilliant, if initially snotty archmage attempting to hire adventurers on her level. After the last pair failed to impress, Red makes a spectacularly confusing first impression, showing off his ranger powers, which utterly baffles Yidra. Despite a rocky start, the duo quickly become friends and adventuring companions, setting out to right the many wrongs in Yidra's world, while trying to find a way to send Red back to his, soon getting swept up in a twisted conspiracy of evil. Episodes 1 and 2 really set the tone for the initial early arc of the season, with a lot of the humor coming from the fact that all of the gimmicks and tropes that come with a Super Sentai show have carried over with Red to this other world. This includes colorful explosions appearing out of nowhere every time Red does something, summoning his team's combining mechas, and other Sentai staples, much to Yidra's puzzlement. There's even a point in episode 2 when they show Red's guild card, an ID that provides stats and info on registered adventurers, and his card is literally laid out like a promotional infographic from a Sentai show, and nothing like our world's typical guild cards. Our girl just keeps taking more psychic damage with every episode. Our protagonist, Asagaki Togo, aka Kizuna Red, is a pretty par for the course for what you'd expect from a Red Ranger. He's passionate, hot-blooded, not the brightest by any means, and quick to jump into action when there's danger, but that's what makes him pretty endearing. These days, anime goes out of its way to make every protagonist either a blank, wish-fulfillment empty shell, or the second coming of Lelouch to the point the hot-blooded idiot hero trope has circled back to being fun again. Plus, Red's high-energy optimism and friendliness contrasting off the more cynical and bleak vibe of the fantasy world's current status makes for a rather interesting dynamic. And even when I use the term idiot hero, Red is not even a bad example of the trope. He's an act first and think on things later type of guy, and sometimes can't read a room to save his life, but he's not clueless. He can get a decent read on most people from time to time, and shows a lot of maturity with handling interpersonal conflicts, which makes sense given he was the leader of the Kizuna Rangers. This is best shown in episode 2 when handling the beef between Yidra and the two asshole adventurers. Most shows would have let our protagonist just punch these jerks into the wall for insulting Yidra's dad and walk away, but Red quickly diffuses the situation and on the fly concocts a less violent and nobody goes to jail way to resolve their dispute. The entire gimmick and theme behind the Kizuna Rangers is bonds and relationships, so it makes sense that their leader would be good at handling situations like this. Gotta give Red credit, instead of running around spouting, "Friendship solves everything," he actually puts the work into helping everyone get over their crappy first impressions of each other and make all of them, even the cynical Yidra, reflect on how badly they were treating each other. So the usage of the power of bonds to charge up Red's super cannon to beat the mysterious chest monster feels earned for once and not just a friendship power cop-out. He's also a lot more observant about people and their intentions than he lets on. When confronting the corrupt town lord in episode 3, Red immediately sees through the old tyrant's flowery speech of order and guiding his people down the right path, via threatening them with his monster magic for what it is. Accurately describing him treating his town and his people more like a toy box where everything goes exactly how he wants, not caring about the wants or needs of his townspeople. While on the surface Red is your average shonen protagonist lock, stock, and barrel, I will say, without getting into manga spoilers, that there's more layers to uncover with our hot-blooded hero to come. While Red is the main attraction for the show, our heroine Yidra is no slouch. The daughter of a disgraced court mage, Yidra seeks to regain her family's lost honor and continue her dad's wish to bring magic that helps everyone, noble and peasant, happiness. However, despite having a similarly idealistic goal like Red, she's been increasingly worn down by the cruelty and apathy of her world, building an icy and standoffish personality to protect herself. Red's earnest heroism and willingness to see the good in others helps Yidra step out of her cynical bubble, and see that in her bitterness, she was no better than some of the jerks she casually wrote off, like the adventurers in episode 2. While a lot of the humor comes from Yidra breaking her brain trying to comprehend the absurdities of Red's Kizuna powers, she shows herself to be a brilliant young woman who dedicates herself to research and keeping her father's ideals of magic advancement for all alive, even in the face of mockery from the upper class and the self-centered mage who took her dad's job. Despite her standoffish attitude, she clearly has empathy hiding behind her tough facade, such as when she offered to let Red live at her family mansion when she discovered this idiot is constantly broke due to his flashy explosive ranger powers, destroying the monster parts of enemies he was sent out to hunt. When it comes to combat, she predictably comes second to Red, but compared to most generic Isekai protagonists, it at least makes sense. Red is a Red Ranger who died basically at his peak in a Sentai series finale, whose powers are considered absurd and very specifically not magic, at least by the standards of Yidra's world. He is very much OP by design, but at the same time, he is not unstoppable. But that doesn't mean Yidra is helpless by any means. She's a genius mage who's considered a prodigy who can definitely solo most enemies herself, but she is the definition of a glass cannon, and in traditional RPG class mechanics, needs a frontline fighter like Red to watch her back. That's probably the thing I love most about Red and Yidra's dynamic. They aren't just love interests, but these two are very much checking each other out on the down low till we get to that stage. But they're very equal partners too. They both support each other's goals, both back each other up in fights, and neither feels like one needs to constantly protect the other. It's rather refreshing. Some might take umbrage with how the series will often use her for cheap fan service, but it's hardly the worst examples. And far more restrained like early years fairy tale fan service, where it's there but doesn't overtake the entire story. Like later years fairy tale. Look, one thing you'll understand about me in future reviews is I'm hardly a prude by any definition of the word. But if they're gonna commit to characters being this much of eye candy, can they at least make them appropriately aged 20-somethings? Constantly doing leery shots of these teenage characters is just blech. Regardless, Yidra is definitely shaping up to be more than the average Isekai waifu of the season, and I'm excited to see where her story goes alongside Red's. Episode 3 is where the story begins to properly kick off its overarching plot and introduces us to the other members of our, for now, quartet. Princess Teltina, the third princess of the Avalon Empire, and her bodyguard, Logi Mist, the world's strongest human. Teltina comes to ask Yedra for assistance in solving the problem with corrupt nobles using mana seeds, demonic power-boosting plot devices, that give the user powerful special abilities based off of their personal desires, but will eventually turn them into out-of-control mana monsters. The chess monster from episode 2 was one such example of these privileged magic users, alongside the lord of the town, Akalena, in episode 3. The town lord better showcases the gimmick behind these mana seeds. He's a brutal control freak who wants everyone under him to obey his whims at all times, so his privileged magic basically gives him a barrier around his territory that lets him spy on his own people and summon dangerous monsters in the blind spots of any who dare to break his petty laws. Although she doesn't have proof, she suspects Xiaoha, the current royal scepter, aka the jerk who took Yidra's father's job, has some hand in it, as the seeds seem to exclusively be in the hands of corrupt nobles who are using this privileged magic to run amok and bring suffering to the people of their kingdom. Yidra quickly accepts the princess's cause, both out of honor for her family's past as a royal scepter, and more personally giddy to finally have an in again with the royal family to show up her hated rival, Xiaoha. Teltina is shown to be a bubbly and typical 15-year-old girl, becoming amused and enamored with the obvious romantic tension between our protagonists, and acts much like an excited child seeing Red's strange powers. However, she also shows that she's had to grow up faster than you'd expect to confront her kingdom's many rising problems, and frustrated at her lack of ability to do anything about it. She's the third princess, and in typical royal dynamics has little to zero authority. She is shown to be the only sane and rational thinking person in the court at the moment, but blocked at every turn by either arrogant or complicit parties. She seeks Yidra's help due to the fact that Yidra continued to send reports on magic research and magic-based issues for the crown to consider, and seemingly was the only one to read them. The fact that Yidra, bitter as she was for her family being kicked out into the cold by her father when the new royal scepter took over, was still sending helpful reports to the crown, inspired Teltina to seek her aid, seeing her as someone she could trust. Teltina is the team's main support character, having no combat abilities but using what little political clout she has to get them where they need to go, alongside some very critical but non-combat focused privilege magic of her own she shows off later in episode 5 tied to dealing with the mana seeds safely. Her bodyguard Logi, on the other hand, is not as friendly. At all. In any sense of the word. Logi Mist, while initially coming off as a massive tool and overly obsessed with Princess Teltina to uncomfortable degrees, quickly became my favorite example of anime's flawed or bad hero archetype. The hero, as far as JRPG-styled fantasy anime, is usually a title or position given to the kingdom's strongest champion, who has some sacred power and grand destiny to quest out into the unknown and vanquish the great evils of their world for the good of humanity. In most modern fantasy mangas and light novels, the hero is often brutally deconstructed, either being an idiotic tool or a one-dimensional sociopath who only got the job due to birthright and only exists to be humiliated and defeated by the real protagonists. Logi at first fits the bill, being the strongest non-otherworlder human on the planet, and being a massive prick. Unless your name is Teltina, he couldn't give a singular crap who you are or what you've got to say. A lot of their humor comes from the dynamic they have of Logi being hostile to everyone and a hyper-simp for Teltina, and Teltina having to keep him in check, much to her exasperation. There's a funny running gag of Logi putting on airs of an issue he has with Red or something else, only for Teltina to demand he speak honestly, and Logi will always speak the unfiltered truth to her, even if it makes him look bad to everyone else. To say Red and Logi get off on the wrong foot would be putting it mildly. It becomes clear Logi sees him as a threat to his position as the only person Teltina can rely on, and this will have some almost dire consequences in episodes 4 and 5. And unlike most bad heroes, Logi can back up his smack talk. His title as the world's strongest man is not an exaggeration. He's considered an S-rank adventurer who slaughtered numerous high-level monsters. Hell, during Red and Logi's duel, he quickly shows he's able to go toe-to-toe with Red's Kisna abilities, and even overtake him to an extent. Red literally needed to summon his team's Megazord to finish the fight, and even then Logi didn't go down easy. However, much like how Red has more layers than just being a goofy oddball going door to door preaching the good word of friendship, Logi himself has just as many. Logi didn't get his position as the princess's right hand easily, and to be honest was dealt a rotten hand by life. Born without magic in a world where everyone has some form of it, he was ostracized and belittled for his magical disability, abandoned by everyone, and forced to eke out a miserable life as a hobo adventurer. Then the princess comes to offer to let him wield the kingdom's powerful hero sword, a blade with incredible power, but will drain the magic out of any wielder till death. However, despite being offered a powerful relic blade only he can wield, he coldly refuses. He makes it clear that humanity has never done him any favors and isn't about to risk his life to be their hero. The princess wins him over with kindness and a promise of always being there for him, and understanding his pain of being isolated and treated wrongly. Being shown the first true act of love and empathy leaves a massive impression on our failure hero, vowing to save the world not for the people who rejected him, but for the woman who embraced him for who he was. While this doesn't excuse his actions and his obsessive attitude, it leagues more reasoning for his behavior than most heroes get, and better paints his state of mind. His life has always been garbage, and now he can be top dog and lord over all the people who wronged him, and to make his princess's dreams come true. So when another powerful non-magic user shows up in their lives, one with a power Teltina is locked in on bringing into her own fold and lacks his baggage, of course he becomes terrified that the princess could replace him with Red, leading to his desperate, foolish choices during the Town Lord arc. Like I said, this doesn't excuse his attempts to get Red killed by stealing his transformation band, but it shows a hell of a lot more depth than most bad heroes, and how Teltina handles it and Logi's very slow steps to improving himself are great. Teltina is much wiser than you'd expect a teenager to be, able to always read Logi's real intentions, and even shocking Red with how well she has him pegged with his own hidden trauma and self-sacrificing tendencies. In spite of this, she does care about Logi and considers him the only man she can rely on, but has to get him to understand they can't take on the world by themselves. But no matter what, he will always be her hero, warts and all. Logi getting over himself and begrudgingly growing to respect Red is a major part of his character arc, and hey, what good Sentai wouldn't have drama between a red and blue themed guy for the first half? Episode 5 is when the plot really kicks off with the introduction of our main villain, and a bombshell of a sentence that changes a lot of things about the show's setting. So, it's a red one this time. Meet Abu Dhabi, a royal demon, aka one of the Demon Queen's children. Checking off another JRPG anime trope, we got the Demon Lord and their minions as the big bads. But much like failure hero Logi, the royal demons have some more layers to them than their usual counterparts. Abu Dhabi is a menace from the get-go, revealing he's killed other worlders like Red before. He oddly enough shows a lot of similarities to the kind of Sentai villains Red is accustomed to fighting, spouting about how easy it is to manipulate humans and how frail their bonds and morals really are when tempted. What's interesting is him and his siblings' motivation to revive their mother, aka the Demon Queen. While reviving the big bad leader of the demons is a well-treaded plotline in these kinds of stories, the motivations are complicated beyond just destroying humanity. Red does pause for a bit, realizing their bond is legitimate, but in order to protect his own, he will have to destroy the demon family's bonds. This is the start of where the show reveals that there's a much darker side to the happy-go-lucky Red than we first thought. But with the timely but mostly unwanted, by Ydra, appearance of the cocky royal scepter, we're going to have to put a pin in that for now. Red Ranger Isekai has been a blast so far. While I have the gift of manga knowledge to know things pick up during episodes 3 through 5, I will admit the story takes its time to roll out to the main plot. But even with the slow start to the good stuff, I've been having fun with the shenanigans of Red doing his silly Sentai nonsense, to the absolute bewilderment of his witchy love interest. If I had any criticisms, I would say the animation could be a little rough, especially with the CG elements like the Kizuna's mecha or other monsters, but it's not the worst, and hey, Sentai fans are used to enjoying stuff on a budget, right? In a sea of carbon copy Isekai slop, Red Ranger has an interesting enough hook to draw me in, and more than enough heart and charm to keep me locked in all season. And trust me, the best is yet to come. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for checking out my video. If you liked what you saw, please leave a like and a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you feel about Red Ranger Isekai. Be sure to subscribe if you'd like to hear a superhero security guard yap more about anime and comic book stuff. I'm trying to get one video out a week, and also I stream on the Purple site, so links below. Thank you again, and I'll catch you all later.